I'd like to talk to you now about one of the very fundamental talents that everyone needs to develop who is going to be in healthcare, not just physicians, but virtually every member of your staff. And that is listening. Listening is the foundational skill of better patient outcomes. When I put together Bedside Matters, I was interviewing a number of doctors and I asked them, what is the most frustrating part of being a doctor these days? Well, after you got past declining reimbursements and a lot of paperwork and all of that, relative to the practice of medicine itself, they like to say patient non-compliance. They would always tell me the patients don't do what they say they're going to do or what we ask them to do in order to get better. And it's very frustrating to them. Well, I looked at a couple of the doctors and I said, well, didn't you hear about this study? And they go, what study are you talking about? And I said, the study that points out that people lose 68% of their hearing when they are naked. And being in a gown counts as being naked. Well, I got to tell you, when I said that, a number of doctors closed their portfolios and were ready to leave and walk away. But luckily, I had with me a poster that I picked up at one of my own doctor's office. And here it is. I'd like to point out a couple of things on this poster. If you take a look at it, you can clearly see that it says people lose 68% of their hearing when they are naked. And it points out that the guy in the gown counts as being naked because it's a position, if you will, of vulnerability. Here he is in the exam room. Now, what's interesting is that if you were able to read the fine print along the bottom, you would see that this study was actually done at the University of Pittsburgh Medical School. And you might be interested to know that it was published in Mayo Proceedings. So the study's been out there for quite a while. As a matter of fact, you can still get this poster from the United Health Foundation. But let's talk about listening. When a message has emotional content, and what number of messages in the healthcare environment do have emotional content? Almost all of them. Well, if a message has emotional content, the person who's receiving it has four things that happen. The first thing that happens is that person will begin to go blind. In other words, they won't literally be without sight, but all of their peripheral vision, studies have shown, will disappear and they'll be very, very focused on a very small point in front of them. The second thing that will happen is patients will, as I mentioned, begin to go deaf. Now, is the deafness really a loss of the auditory function? No. Why are they deaf? Because they're hearing something in someone else. That something in someone else would be their own voice saying to themselves in a much louder voice than you're speaking to them, oh my gosh, what does this mean? What am I going to do? How long is this going to last? How am I going to pay for this? What's going to happen to me? All of those conversations are being held and you can't hear, or they can't hear you. It's no fault of their own. Now they've gone blind. Now they've gone deaf. The third thing is they will actually stop breathing. I remember when I received a diagnosis that I wasn't too fond of. I remember when after the doctor said malignant, I literally looked down and I did this. I did, and I didn't do the other part, you know, the intake part. I just exhaled deeply for a while. Now, some people exhale deeply, as I did. Other people, when they hear emotional messages, they do this. They go, and then it catches in their throat. But they don't have the complete cycle. Now, it only takes a few seconds of oxygen deprivation for the brain to start sending out signals of panic. So, a person can't hear you, they can't see you, they can't breathe, and for a few moments anyways, it's been proven that every cell in the body ceases momentarily normal cellular function. So, they can't see you, they can't hear you, they can't breathe, and in effect they're shutting down. Unfortunately, what they can do is appear to be in a conversation with you. And doctors tell me of instances where they'll explain to a patient, now, here's the deal. I am going to give you a new prescription. when you start taking this new prescription, Ms. Patient, you don't have any longer to take the other prescription that you've been taking that I gave you for the last 3 years, because that prescription is now in this new prescription along with something else. And the other thing that I want you to remember is that after you start taking this new prescription for at least 1 hour, don't lay down. Remain sitting, standing, or take a short walk. Do you have any questions? The patient replies, no. The doctor asks again, are you sure? The patient says, I'm sure. Well then, good, we'll see you next month. It's at that point that the patient gets up, goes out to the checkout clerk or the scheduler, and so often says, excuse me, but do you have it written down somewhere what he just told me? I think I've got it. What he wants me to do is double up on my old medicine, take the new medicine just before I take a nap. I'm pretty sure I've got it. Well, 2 problems. Number 1, that's not at all what the physician said. Number 2, how in the world is the checkout clerk going to know what the doctor said inside of the examination room? Now, how do you mitigate this problem of panic and these symptoms of panic that the patients experience? One thing is to repeat key messages over and over again. Second thing is to ask the patient to read back, or to give you back what they heard you say. Just make sure that you're checking for errors. Third thing is that you can encourage your patient to take notes. Fourth thing is you can bring in an advocate. Fifth thing is, and many doctors are doing this nowadays, is to encourage their patients to bring in an agenda, stuff that they want to talk about. It's proven that it doesn't take that much longer in terms of the visit if the patient brings in an agenda. So, just remember, whenever a message has emotional content, you know, the kind you see all the time, the patient can't hear you, they can't see you, they can't breathe, and they're shutting down. Now, let's take it off of the patient-doctor relationship, and let's talk about some of the conversations you might have of an emotional nature with staff members. Again, if you're a manager, supervisor, or leader of the staff, remember that when you have emotional conversations as deemed by the listener, that listener is going to have trouble remembering what you say. You might want to say, now, make sure that you understand that the office hours are actually 8:30 until 4:30, unlike the hours you've been keeping, which is somewhere after 9 to about 2:30 in the afternoon. So I want to make sure that you understand that we have this talk and we'll be expecting a little bit better in terms of attendance. Do you have any questions? No. Did you understand what I mean? No. Did they hear the conversation? Big no. They didn't hear the conversation because they didn't know whether they were going to make history or be history. So the idea here is in these difficult conversations, make sure that you get the other person to repeat back to you the key points of the message. That way, you can make sure that the message is delivered and the appropriate action will be taken. Because it's kind of unfair to hold people accountable for conversations through no fault of their own that they didn't fully hear. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.